Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online character build video with me, Sherman. Today guys, I bring you the Death Knight. I know this is one that a lot of you have been waiting for, and we'll get to it in just a second. But before we do, disclaimer, this is a roleplay, casual play build. This is not meant for meta play. Now that that's out of the way, what is the Death Knight? The Death Knights are a group of necromantic knights that use death and decay to bring chaos to order. They are unholy in every sense of the word. And they bring chaos with them wherever they go. So here is the Death Knight character, guys. We are a Death Knight Necromancer. We are a Khajiit for this. Now, any race will work for this. It doesn't have to be a Khajiit. Orc actually is really good with this. The Dark Elf is really good with this. Khajiit's really good with this. Pretty much any of the stamina races are going to be better for this. But even the Magicka races can be really good with this. So it's kind of like you get this mixed bag depending on which way you go. So, as you can see, we do have 64 points in the stamina. This is to maximize our stamina stuff because this character is primarily a damage dealer. They can be a tank or a healer. Now, if you wanted to play this as a tank, you would want to take out of here and take this up to about 32k health and then put the rest back into stamina. This way you can be a more effective tank and have a good, decent stamina based pool. So, to play this as a healer, you guys know, take everything out of stamina, dump it into Magicka. Alright, so going over our stats, we have 18k Magicka, 25k health, 32k stamina, with a 926 mag recovery, 517 health recovery, 855 stamina recovery. We do have an 1806 spell damage with a 28% weapon or spell critical. We do have a 2788 weapon damage with a 37% weapon critical. Now this weapon critical does go higher because of the way the build works. We also have 18k spell resist, 17k physical resist. We are using the Thief Mundus Stone to boost our damage. If you're going to play a tank with this, my suggestion is to use the Lady Mundus Stone to get you closer to like a 21k spell resist, 21k physical resist, as close as you can. And then we do use Tri-Stat food all the time. Now the reason we use Tri-Stat food is so we can play that more hybridized character, so we can play tank, healer, damage dealer, whatever we need to be. Primarily damage dealer. Alright, now moving on to the gear and going over the potions real quick. When we play tank, we use a tripot. When we play healer, we use a spell power pot, and when we play damage dealer, we use a stamina power pot. So those are the ideal pots to use for when you're playing different roles. And really, I only use the pots for when I'm in dungeons or in trials. Moving on to the food again, longfin pasty with melon sauce. Now let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the sets that we're using. Starting with the monster set, the first set, we are using Thorvikins. Now Thorvikins is a really good set for this because it adds to your max health pool. But number two, when you take damage from a nearby enemy, you summon a growing pool of desecrated bile for 8 seconds. Enemies in the bile take 619 disease damage every 1 second and are afflicted with minor maim and minor defile for 4 seconds, reducing their damage done and their healing received and health recovery by 15%. This effect can occur once every 8 seconds. Now the next set we're using, you guys can probably guess, Hunting's Rage. Now, Hunting's Rage is really good with this because we get that high weapon critical on the 2-piece and the 4-piece, the extra stamina with the 3-piece. But the 5-piece adds a lot of weapon damage, and this really adds to that capability to where this character is more of a damage dealer. So, now the next set. And this is where it's going to confuse a few people. So the next set we're using is called the Affliction set. Now this is a new formatted version that they did with the Elsewhere update. So this used to give health, magicka, stamina. But now, or it was magicka stamina with stam recovery or something like that. Now it does weapon damage, max stamina, and stam recovery. When you deal damage, you have a 50% chance to deal an additional 2,452 disease damage and apply minor defile to the target, reducing their healing received by 15% for 4 seconds. This effect can happen every 4 seconds. So the reason why we use this in combination with Thorvikins is this way we can keep minor defile applied 100% of the time. Because anything you can do to reduce healing on enemies, especially in dungeons and trials, because there's usually a healer or two in those situations, it helps you kill the enemies faster. So it's really nice. Now going over the traits and enchants on the gear, excuse me, starting with the monster set, we do have invigorating, and again I'm going to reply to this because everyone asked me, why do you use invigorating? On my heavy armor builds, I use invigorating because you don't get any sort of stam and health recovery, or stamina or magic recovery, within heavy armor. So this just adds to your ability to get that higher stam and magic recovery, so you can play more effectively into either any of the roles. Alright, we are using tri-stats with a medium helm. Now the reason we choose medium helm and not medium gloves, I have done the testing on this. Medium helm actually gives you higher resistances with heavy gloves. So, and a light belt. So this is what we do for this kind of crafted build. Is when we do a crafted set, we make the belt light, everything else heavy, and then we make sure our monster set helm is medium. So we can get the highest amount of resistances out of our character. Now moving on to the shoulders, we are using a Divine's Max Stamina because this is primarily a stamina build. We want to maximize that stamina pool. So we use that Divine's to increase our Mundus Stone power, but also to give us that higher stamina pool. Moving on to the chest, we are using a reinforced heavy chest with a tri-stat. The reinforced heavy chest is just to maximize resistances. No matter what you play, if you use crafted in any kind, or even a monster set, if you put the heavy piece reinforced, especially if it's the helm or the chest, it's going to really help you maximize your survivability. So when you're in those situations like dungeons or you're doing a trial, you have that greater survivability, and you're not going to die as easily. So we do that. Tri-stat, again, to hybridize. Moving on to the gloves, we are using Divine's Max Stamina. I'm not going to keep explaining this, but we use the Max Stamina to maximize stamina pool, and the Divine's to increase our Mundus Stone use. Moving on to the belt, we do use a light belt, Divine's Max Stamina again. You guys know the process here. And then onto the leggings, we use Invigorating again with the tri-stat. On the big pieces, it's best to use tri-stat glyphs. On the smaller pieces, it's better to use a magicka health or stamina glyph because it gives you more resources. If you use a small enchant or use one of these in the small piece, you actually only get 100 and something of each resource, to where this way you get 351 of one resource. So it really allows you to maximize one resource while working around with the others. Now moving on to the boots, we are using Divine's again, Max Stamina. Now going over the jewelry, starting with the rings, we are using 2 Trirune rings. Now you gotta, I'm gonna let people know this. If you cannot get you don't have access to transmutation, do not stress it. You can still go with the 3 healthy here. It's fine. Just do the same setup with the jewelry, 2 weapon damage and 1 mag recovery. And just leave it all healthy. The reason I do this for myself is because this allows me to hybridize better. So I can effectively use magicka, stamina, and health in any role I need to play. So, and we do use 2 weapon damage here to maximize our weapon damage capabilities. And then on the necklace, we use an infused to enhance the enchantment of the recovery so we get a higher mag recovery rating. Now moving on to the weapons, we are using a two-handed Nirnhone sword. You guys should have known that too. If you don't have Nirnhone, you can use Sharpen, and we use an Oblivion damage enchant. This is basically just goes through any shields, anything. You will always be applying 1,000 damage no matter what. They can't avoid that damage. So that's why we use the Oblivion. Now moving on to the bow, we use a infused weapon damage and spell damage enchant here. The reason why is to maximize our capability with Magicka and Stamina. So even if we're playing more healer, we can still take advantage of that higher spell damage for that purpose. We can take advantage of that higher weapon damage for our damage capabilities. Even if we're playing tank or healer. So it's like we want to take advantage of our character in every way we can. Now that I've shown you that, we're going to take a look at the skills. And starting with the class skills and passives, because of the way this character plays, we primarily take mostly stamina based and Magicka mixed in. So most of the abilities, if it has a stamina morph, you're going to take the stamina morph. You're going to take Magicka morph because it just works. And then on the middle one, we do the same thing. We take the stamina morphs with the Magicka. And then on the Living Death, use Mortal Coil. I'm going to let you in on this secret. Use Mortal Coil. It's a great heal, and it gives stamina back to you. So it's a way for you to manage your resources on the stamina side so you can still play an effective healer. Alright. Now, moving on, and hopefully that won't happen again. We do unlock all our class passives, and then moving on to the weapons, we do use primarily a two-handed weapon, so you are going to want to take all the active abilities and passives here. Our other weapon of choice is a bow. We take all the active abilities and passives. Moving on to armors. Light armor, because we do wear one piece of light armor, it's good to take advantage of that one piece. Even though it's a very small amount, it can add up with all the other percentage bonuses you get. So we take these as well. Medium armor, we do the same thing on the top two and the bottom one. This way we can take advantage of those greater resource management, control, damage output, that kind of stuff. When it comes to heavy armor, we will take all the passives, including the active ability, because you never know. Like, this is something that I get asked. Why do you keep showing all these different abilities that your character has unlocked? Why don't you just use what's on the bar? Because I never just play one role. I'm never in just one situation where this is perfect all the time. So having access to more abilities and more tools allows you that ability to play your character more effectively no matter what you're doing. Whether you're playing in Overland, you're playing in PvP, you're playing in PvE. Now moving on to world skills. You can be a vampire with this. I did originally have it as a vampire, but I changed it out of vampire because I really like the idea of being non-vampire or werewolf with this. But I did take the ultimate ability and the active abilities to soul magic along with these soul magic passives. Fighter skill. I take all the active abilities, including the ultimate, and I take the ones that best reflect my ability to play my character. Now, it depends on the situation on where some of this will come into play, but I do use every ability I can, and I take advantage of it. Like Evil Hunter, I use when I'm solo playing, so I don't have to waste a potion to boost my weapon critical, and I'll put this on the both front and back bar. And then I'll use something like Rally to boost my weapon damage, so I don't have to waste a potion. And I'm only playing in Overland when I'm soloing, or in Delves or Public Dungeons, so I don't need that much. Alright. Mage's Guild, we do the same thing. We unlock all the ultimate and active abilities plus passives. This way, when we play healer, or even when we play tank, we can take advantage of some of these abilities. Like Spell Symmetry for when you're playing healer, so you can give up health to gain Magicka, so you can do more effective healing. But you do want to wait 4 seconds after you activate that before you do try to heal somebody, because your healing is reduced by 50% in strength. Cedric Order, I take all the active or ultimate and active abilities plus the passives. This way I can access these tools as well for different situations, along with the Undaunted skill line. Undaunted is really good because they're all synergies, so That's why we use it. On top of that, this is my primary taunt for when I'm tanking, and damage shield for when I'm tanking. So, and then when I'm playing a healer, I use Mystic Orbs to give resources to my allies. I use Shadow Silk and Sanguine Altar for different situations. Really depends. Moving on to Assault skills, I do unlock the passive or active abilities and passives that best reflect my ability to play this character in PvE. So if you look, I don't have a lot of everything unlocked because most of this is PvP orientated, except for these 3 abilities. Same thing goes with support. I take these 3 abilities and this one passive because I can use them outside of PvP really effectively. Now racial, again, any race can play this, but since we are a Khajiit, I'm going to go over these really quick. We have robustness. This increases your health, magicka, and stamina recovery. Health by 100, and then your magic and stamina by 85. When you get the 2 invigorating pieces, you get another 22 added to that 85, and it takes you just over 100 extra recovery rating. When you have all that plus different things that give you resource management, like recovery ratings and stuff, it does boost it a little bit better. Next up, we have Lunar Blessing. This one increases the maximum health, magicka, and stamina by 825. And then Feline Ambush increases your critical damage and critical healing by 10%. It also decreases your your detection radius and stealth by 3 meters. Moving on to Alchemy. This is a great crafting passive because it's called medicinal use. When using potions, resulting effects last 30% longer. And then on to Provisioning. We have Gourmand and Connoisseur. Both of these are to help aid you, increasing the length that your food lasts for 20 minutes. And your drinks. So this just really helps you out in different situations. Drinks primarily for when you're trying to get a maximized stat setup. For recovery and stuff. Like when I play healer, I'll use this, or even sometimes when I'm playing damage dealer, I'll use a drink like Dubious Cameron Throne or Witchmother's Potent Brew, so I get that higher health, stamina recovery and magic recovery. So, but normally I just use tri-stat foods, so Gourmand is good enough for me. Now, let's go over the skills we have on our bar. Now remember, these skills are just suggestions. You do not have to use these morphs. You can use any morph you want. And on top of that, you can use any skill setup you choose. This is just what I use when I play damage. Starting with the first ability, we have Wrecking Blow. Now this does a big hit of damage up front and grants you Empower for 5 seconds, increasing the damage of your next light attack by 40%. Next ability we have is our Venom Skull. This does X amount of damage up front, and every 3rd cast of this increases the damage by 20%. While slotted, casting a Necromancer ability will count towards the 3rd cast. Next ability we have is Carve. This does damage up front and damage over 10 seconds. It's really nice. Plus it's a cone attack, so it hits multiple enemies. Next ability we have is Blighted Blast Bones. Now this will summon a skeleton that after 2.5 seconds will run out into towards the target you had activated it on. It'll explode, dealing X amount of damage to all enemies nearby and applying Major Defile to them for 4 seconds, reducing their healing received and health recovery by 30%. So not only will you have Major Defile applied on an enemy, you also have Minor Defile. And Minor Defile will be applied more often. So it's really nice. Next up, we have Ruinous Scythe. Slice into your enemy's life force, dealing X amount of physical damage. And every 3rd cast of this ability will set enemies off balance. And then you heal for X amount of health for the first enemy hit, and an additional amount of health for each additional enemy hit, up to 5 times. And the healing of this ability scales off your max health. Last ability we have is Flawless Dawnbreaker. Now this gives you an ability that does a cone attack in front of you in a 10-meter radius. So it's like a 10-meter cone in front of you that does X amount of damage to all enemies hit, and then X amount of damage to all enemies hit over time for 6 seconds. So this is a nice, like, what I like to call a trash pack remover. When you're fighting trash packs, drop Dawnbreaker. Boom. Wipes them out. And it kills them pretty quick. And then while slotted, your weapon damage is increased by 5%. Moving on to the back bar, we have Rearming Trap. Now this is very similar to the skeleton. You set it out, it takes 1.5 seconds to arm, and then it'll trigger on an enemy, and when it triggers it does X amount of damage, and then an extra amount of damage over 6 seconds, and it also immobilizes the enemy if they can be immobilized for 6 seconds, and it grants you minor force, increasing your critical damage by 10%. Since we're Khajiit, we get 10% also, so we get a 20% just from these two together. And we get another 20% from our champion. So we actually get a 40% increase in critical damage. We have a 90% critical damage output. It's really crazy. And then after being triggered, the trap will reset itself and do it one more time. That's why it's called rearming trap. Next ability we have is Venom Arrow. This does damage up front and damage over time. Now, unlike the poison injection, which is what a lot of people use because it deals more damage over time when the enemy's below 50% health. I don't like to use that when I'm playing more of a heavy armor character because I'm up front and I'm right there at the enemies. I like to use this because I can hit enemies with this, and if they're casting abilities, they'll be interrupted, set off balance, and stunned for 3 seconds. Next ability we have is Arrow Barrage. Now this one launches a multitude of arrows in the sky that rain down, dealing X amount of damage to the enemies every 0.5 seconds for 8 seconds. It's just a nice damage over time ability. It does cover a bigger radius than Endless Hail, so that's why I like to use it with the heavy armor setup. And it does cost a little bit more stamina, but don't stress it. Moving on to the next ability, we have Detonating Siphon. Now this is really cool. When one of your blast bones goes out and dies against an enemy, you can activate this ability, and it will deal X amount of disease damage over 12 seconds, and it's a large amount of damage to all enemies around the corpse and between you and the corpse. If the siphon lasts for its full duration, it causes the corpse to explode, dealing an additional amount of damage, disease damage to all enemies around the corpse. While slotted, your damage done is increased by 3%. This is really good for on the back bar because we can get that higher damage output with our character. Now, this is optional. I like to use Agony Totem because I like to have a synergy I can give out to my allies. And it's also a nice synergy because it gives us minor protection for 9.5 seconds, reducing our damage by 8%. After 2 seconds, it will fear the enemies and lock them in place for 4 seconds. And then on top of that, allies can activate the pure agony synergy, causing enemies to take X amount of magic damage over 5 seconds and applying minor vulnerability to them for the duration, increasing their damage taken by 8%. So this just helps us boost our damage capabilities for us and our group on those enemies inside this circle. The next ability we have is Pestilence Colossus. Now this one, you basically summon up this Colossus that will do 3 attacks over 3 seconds, and each attack deals disease damage, and it grows with each attack. Now on each smash, it also grants major vulnerability to the enemy hit for 3 seconds, increasing their damage taken by 30%. Now this lasts, technically, it says it does it over 3 seconds, but every smash reapplies minor vulnerability. So the first smash applies it for 3 seconds, the second smash reapplies it for 3 seconds, and the third smash reapplies it for 3 seconds. So in reality, you get 5 seconds of major vulnerability. It's a really cool ability and really helps your group in damage. Alright, now that I've shown you the skills, gear sets, and all that, we're going to go over CP. And then CP, we're going to go into a parse. So starting with the red tree, we have 56 in Ironclad. This reduces your damage taken for direct damage attacks by 20%. 18 in the Spell Shield. This increases spell resistance by 1729. Moving on over here, we have 31 into Thick Skin, reducing your damage taken for damage over time effects by 13%. 43 into Hardy, reducing your damage taken from physical poison disease damage by 10%, and 43 in Elemental Defender, reducing your damage taken from Flame Frost, Shock, and Magic damage by 10%. Final red tree, we have 40 into Bastion. This increases the effectiveness of your damage shields by 16%. 19 into Quick Recovery, increasing your healing received by 5%, and 20 into Heavy Armor Focus, increasing your physical resistance by 19,000 or 1,900 while wearing 5 pieces of heavy armor. Moving on to the green tree, 40 into Warlord, reducing your break free cost by 16%. 16 into Sprinter, reducing your sprint cost by 10%. 16 into Bashing Focus, reducing your bash cost by 10%. And then moving on over here, we have 43 into Mooncalf, increasing our stam recovery by 10%. And 75 into Tenacity, increasing our magicka and stamina of our fully charged heavy attacks by 14%. Moving on, we have 40 into Tumbling, reducing our dodge roll cost by 16%. 40 into Shadow Ward, reducing your block cost by 16%. And then moving on to the blue tree, we have 43 into Blessed, increasing your healing done by 10%. Moving on to the middle tree, 35 into Physical Weapon Expert, increasing your weapon damage done with light and heavy attacks for two-handed, one-handed and shield, dual-wield bow and bow weapons, plus werewolf form by 20%. And then we have the Master at Arms, increasing your damage done with direct damage attacks by 16%. Now, the reason we put so many points in here, because I was just asked this again the other day, in a very vulgar way, why in the F do you do this? It's mainly because, one, it unlocks Reposit. Whenever I block an attack, it gives me a 15% chance to deal damage back to the enemy. That can happen every 5 seconds. I block a lot of attacks when I'm playing damage dealer, even a tank, so I take advantage of this. On top of that, we get Butcher, which increases your damage done with light and heavy attacks by 5% to enemies below 25% health. This boost, this 5%, also applies to your Master at Arms and this. So you get not only 20% here, 16% here, 5% here. So you actually get a 41% increase in your damage done with light and heavy attacks. On top of that, you also have 56 in here, which also boosts your physical poison disease damage by 12%. Your light and heavy attacks are considered physical damage. So this 12% gets added to that 41%, and you do 53% more damage with your light and heavy attacks. That's why I have this character set up this way. Now, we have 56 on the Precise Strikes. This increases critical damage and critical healing done with stamina abilities by 20%. And then we have 40 into Thaumaturge. This increases your damage done with damage over time effects by 16%. So this overall makes this character a more effective stamina damage dealer. Now, if this character was being hybridized, I wouldn't have this setup. So, and I would still get a decent amount of damage out of him. Alright, now that you guys have seen the CP and everything else, we are going to do some quick parses on this before we take it into a dungeon, and you guys can see how effective it can be in that situation. But this is just to show its effectiveness of doing damage. So we are going to do a quick parse here. Throw the trap. Usually I can pull about 21k DPS, but for some reason, I don't know, maybe it's just me, my keys just don't like me today. I couldn't get him to activate the proper abilities fast enough, so. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do a quick parse on this big one. Now this is more for when you're playing in an organized group. That means if you're playing in a trial group, not a dungeon group. The other one over there would have been more like if you were in a dungeon group, and not a super close proximity, but close enough. This thing in a dungeon could probably pull about 25k DPS, maybe a little more, maybe 30k, depending on how your group dynamic is set up. In a trial, you're going to have more group buffs, debuffs, and everything else. So this is what organized group damage will look like. Oh, I missed it. We'll try and get it on the next go. There we go. Now I'm going to get it. And we're going to drop our Pestilence Golem. Now, for some reason, this thing is not doing like it was the other day, where it was doing really good. I was able to pull 32k DPS with this, and I wasn't having any resource issues. I don't know what's wrong with today. It could be the fact that I'm not using the other food like I was testing with, because I was testing with other foods when I originally built this character for testing purposes for the Death Knight. I was using the Dubious Cameron Throne, so I did have better stam recovery. So, but that is the Death Knight so far. Now we're going to go ahead and switch some skills around so we can play this more effectively in a dungeon scenario as a solo character. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this and move this out of the way. We're going to move this over just like that, and then on the back bar we're actually going to get rid of this and unfortunately that, and we're going to put our, actually, you know what we should probably do? We should probably put that other one on there too. Let me do this real quick, guys. I'm going to put this on the front bar like that, and then I'm also going to put the Grave Lord's thing on the back bar here, and then this way I can have an extra ability here for a little bit of extra damage. So we'll do that. Oops. We are going to go over to the Depths of Malatar like usual, and this way you guys can see what this thing's like in a dungeon scenario. Now, you got to remember, this thing's primary capabilities is damage. So playing it as a tank doesn't mean that it can't do it. It can, it's just it's going to be more damage orientated than an average tank. But this thing is pretty sick in dungeons and when you are in overland play. Like, I tested a lot of stuff with it, and it was crazy how much damage this thing can take and dish out and everything else. So another great ability is to use his Deaden Pain. Right. I'm going to use a quick tripod here, just to give me a little bit more resources and recovery rate for when we go to face this ugly thing. Yeah, you weren't expecting to face your own vile stuff, were you? Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and let him kill me now, because I could fight this guy, and I'm enjoying myself too much, and I don't want to do that. But yeah, this is pretty much how the Death Knight works in solo play. So, oh, I hit the wrong button, guys. I need to run like heck. And I think I went the wrong way too. Yep, I did. Run away! But yeah, that's pretty much the Death Knight in action. As you guys saw, this thing actually does proc quite a bit. I'm going to go ahead and show you guys this so you can see that it does proc Affliction and Thorvikins together. This one 89 times, this one 19 times. It does work in unison, so it's really good combination. And the amount of damage you can get out of some of this stuff is pretty nice. It's not a whole lot, but it can add up when you add in all the other dot damage and everything that you have going on. So, but that is pretty much it for the Death Knight, guys. I hope you guys like this build. I really did have a lot of fun creating the build and trying to come up with a unique, dynamic type character for this. And it didn't take long to figure out that these are the sets I wanted to use after seeing the Affliction set change, realizing how powerful Thorvikin could be, and then with the combination of Hunding's Rage in there, it really adds to that idea of, like, I'm here to bring death and chaos. So it's a really fun build. It's really good to play. And this leads me to the next thing. You guys know what's coming next. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day. And this guy might see you in game. Bye.